There are stories we tell in the light, and there are truths that live in the shadows. This is a story about a weapon that officially doesn't exist. It's also about a weapon that might exist, and the storm that surrounds it. This is a story about two countries, two paths, and one bomb. The bomb that is, and the bomb that might be. Imagine a country in the heart of the Middle East. For decades, it has been widely believed by experts and intelligence agencies around the world to possess a powerful nuclear arsenal, dozens, maybe hundreds of warheads. Enough to change the fate of any conflict, yet this country has never signed the global treaty meant to stop the spread of such weapons. It allows no international inspectors. It has never faced sanctions for its program. When asked, its leaders offer only a practiced, cryptic silence. The world, for the most part, offers its silence in return. Now, imagine another country in the same region. This nation is suspected of wanting to build a nuclear weapon. Its nuclear program is under the constant watch of international inspectors. It has signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Every step it takes is analyzed, debated, and often condemned. It has been buried under years of crippling economic sanctions. Its leaders have been warned repeatedly that a military strike is on the table to stop them from ever getting the bomb. The first country is Israel. The second is Iran. The question that hangs in the air is simple, but it's a question that can make people very uncomfortable. Why the difference? Why the silence for one and the storm for the other? The common answer is simple too. It's about who has the weapon. We are told one country is a stable, responsible partner, while the other is a dangerous, rogue state. One is a friend, the other an enemy. And in a way that's true, but it might not be the whole truth. It feels too neat, too clean. What if the story isn't just about warheads and centrifuges? What if it's really about the stories we are told and the stories we choose to believe? This isn't just about geopolitics, it's about psychology. This video is an attempt to understand a strange phenomenon: the quiet, and sometimes vocal, support for Iran's nuclear ambitions from people and nations who have no love for its government. It's easy to dismiss this as support for a dangerous regime. But what if it's something else? What if it's a reaction? A form of resistance not for Iran, but against a system that seems to have two sets of rules. We're going to look at the unspoken reality of Israel's nuclear power, a policy the Israelis themselves call Amimut, or ambiguity. We will explore how the very international laws used to pressure Iran were built in a way that gives a free pass to others. And finally, we'll touch on a deep human instinct, our tendency to question a story when it feels rigged. We will look at the psychology of the underdog and how the perception of an unfair fight can lead people to side with the very person they're told to fear. This is not a defense of any government. It's an examination of a double standard. And it's an exploration of how that double standard, left to fester in the dark, might be the very thing that makes the world a more dangerous place. It's the unspoken bomb, the one made not of uranium, but of hypocrisy. And its fallout is shaping the world in ways we are only beginning to understand. To understand the silence, we have to go back to the beginning. Back to a time when the state of Israel was young, surrounded by neighbors who viewed its existence as a temporary mistake. For its founding leaders, the memory of the Holocaust was not a distant historical event. It was a lived, searing trauma. The promise of never again was not a political slogan. It was the country's entire reason for being. In the late 1950s, in the middle of the Negev desert, a secret project began. With crucial help from France, construction started on a large facility near the town of Dimona. The official story? It was a textile factory. Then a metallurgical research station. Benign, civilian, peaceful. But a few people knew the truth. This was Israel's path to the ultimate guarantee of its survival. It was the heart of a secret nuclear weapons program. The definitive story of this is told by the scholar Avner Cohen in his book, Israel and the Bomb. Cohen details a national project of immense secrecy and determination. For Israel's leadership, particularly figures like David Ben-Gurion and Shimon Peres, a nuclear deterrent was not about aggression. It was about preventing a final, successful attack from its adversaries. It was a weapon they hoped to never use, but one they felt they could not survive without. A last resort. But they faced a dilemma. If they openly declared themselves a nuclear power, they would invite a storm of international condemnation. It could trigger an arms race in the Middle East, and it would certainly create immense pressure from the United States, which was publicly committed to stopping the spread of nuclear weapons. On the other hand, if no one knew they had it, what was the point of having a deterrent? A secret weapon can't scare anyone. So they chose a third path, a path of deliberate strategic ambiguity. In Hebrew, it's called Amimut. Amimut is a masterpiece of political communication. It's a policy of neither confirming nor denying the existence of nuclear weapons. If an Israeli leader is asked, "Does Israel have the bomb?" the answer is a carefully worded formula. Israel will not be the first to introduce nuclear weapons to the Middle East. Think about that sentence. It's brilliant. It sounds reassuring, defensive even, but it's full of holes you can drive a tank through. What does introduce mean? Does it mean build them, or use them, or announce them? They have never clarified, so the world is left to guess. This policy allowed Israel to have its cake and eat it too. Its neighbors and the wider world strongly suspected they had the bomb. The deterrence was in place. But because they never said it out loud, they could avoid the political price. They didn't have to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or NPT, the global agreement designed to prevent the spread of nukes. They weren't subject to its rules or inspections. They were a nuclear state in practice, but not on paper. Of course, this secret couldn't be kept forever. In 1986, a technician named Mordecai Vanunu, who had worked for years inside the Dimona facility, decided his conscience demanded he tell the world. He smuggled photographs out of the complex and gave them to the Sunday Times in London. His information and pictures were detailed, showing what experts concluded was undeniable proof of a sophisticated, well-advanced nuclear weapons program. Vanunu paid a heavy price. He was lured to Rome by Israeli intelligence, kidnapped, and brought back to Israel. He spent 18 years in prison, much of it in solitary confinement. For Israel, he was a traitor who had threatened the nation's core security doctrine. For others, he was a hero, a whistleblower who exposed a truth the world was pretending not to see. The Vanunu affair blew the secret wide open. After his revelations, it was no longer a matter of speculation. It was a public fact, and yet, nothing changed. This is perhaps the most crucial part of the story. The world knew. The United States, Israel's most powerful ally, certainly knew. Declassified documents show that American presidents knew about Israel's program from very early on. There were tense meetings, like one between President Kennedy and Ben-Gurion. Kennedy was worried. He pushed for inspections. Israel allowed a few carefully managed American visits to Dimona, showing them only parts of the facility, a performance designed to calm fears without revealing the truth. But over time, Washington's position softened. It evolved into a quiet acceptance, a sort of don't ask, don't tell policy between the two allies. As long as Israel kept its arsenal in the basement and didn't make a scene, the US would look the other way. The strategic value of a powerful, stable ally in the region with the ultimate weapon was, it seems, more important than the public goal of non-proliferation. So the policy of Amimut continued, no longer a secret from the public, but now an open secret. An official fiction that everyone agrees to play along with. It allows Israel to maintain its powerful deterrent. It allows the United States to avoid a political headache and a confrontation with a key ally. It allows the international community to avoid the crisis that would come from officially acknowledging another nuclear state outside the established club. The system works for those it is designed to work for. It's a quiet, stable arrangement. But this stability creates a deep and unsettling imbalance. It creates a precedent. It sets up a world where the rules are for some, but not for others. And that is the world that Iran looked at when its own nuclear ambitions began to grow. The silence surrounding Dimona became the background noise for the storm that would soon gather over Iran. Now we turn to the other side of the story. The one played out not in secret, but on the world stage, under the full glare of international scrutiny. The story of Iran. And like many stories in the Middle East, it's full of strange ironies. Iran's nuclear journey didn't begin with hostility towards the West. It began with its friendship. In the 1950s, under the American-backed Shah, Iran launched its nuclear program as part of President Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace initiative. The United States helped build Iran's first research reactor in Tehran. The plan was to build a network of nuclear power plants to provide energy for a modernizing country. Then came 1979. The Iranian Revolution overthrew the Shah and brought a fiercely anti-Western clerical government to power. The nuclear program stalled, but in the 1980s, during the brutal, bloody war with Saddam Hussein's Iraq, Iran's leaders saw their cities bombarded with chemical weapons. They saw the world do very little to stop it. They came to the same conclusion Israel had decades earlier. If you want to guarantee your survival in a dangerous neighborhood, you need the ultimate weapon, or at least the ability to build one if you have to. So Iran's program was restarted, this time with a new secret dimension. When this secret work was revealed in the early 2000s, the international reaction was the polar opposite of the silence that greeted Israel's program. It was immediate, and it was furious. This is where the international rules come in. Unlike Israel, Iran was and is a signatory to the 1970 Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT. This is the cornerstone of the world's effort to control nuclear weapons. The deal is simple. Countries that don't have nukes promise not to build them. In exchange, they get to access peaceful nuclear technology, like power plants. And the 5 original nuclear powers, the US, Russia, China, the UK, and France, promise to work towards getting rid of their own weapons. Because Iran signed the treaty, it was legally obligated to open its facilities to the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA. The IAEA is the UN's nuclear watchdog. Its job is to be the inspector to make sure no one is cheating. For years, IAEA inspectors have been on the ground in Iran, setting up cameras, taking samples, and producing regular reports. And for years, the story has been one of suspicion and friction. Iran has been accused of hiding work, of building secret facilities like the one at Natanz or Fordo, and of not being fully transparent with inspectors. It has been a constant cat-and-mouse game. In response, the world, led by the United States, applied what it calls maximum pressure. A web of economic sanctions was woven around Iran, cutting it off from the global financial system. Its oil sales plummeted, its currency collapsed. Ordinary Iranians paid the price, facing inflation and shortages of medicine. The goal was to strangle Iran's economy so badly that its leaders would have no choice but to give up their nuclear ambitions. This is where the double standard becomes impossible to ignore. Iran, which is part of the NPT and allows inspectors on its soil, is punished with sanctions for its potential to build a weapon. Israel, which is not part of the NPT, allows no inspectors and is widely understood to have a large nuclear arsenal, faces no sanctions. This is where a theory from the world of political science might help us. It's called realism, and one of its main thinkers is John Mearsheimer. Realist theory is pretty cynical. It argues that international politics is always a struggle for power between states. High-minded ideals like international law and cooperation are nice, but they are secondary. Powerful states, Mearsheimer would argue, will always shape and bend the rules to serve their own interests and maintain their dominance. From this perspective, the NPT isn't just a tool for peace. It's also a tool for power. It's a way for the existing nuclear haves to prevent new members from joining the club. It keeps the power structure in place. For nations like Iran, the message is clear. The rules are for you, the weak, to follow. They are not for us, the powerful, or for our friends. The argument from the West is that this is not about hypocrisy, but about character. Israel is a democracy. Its leaders are seen as predictable and responsible. Iran's government is seen as a radical theocracy that sponsors terrorism and whose leaders have called for Israel's destruction. Giving them a nuclear weapon would be, in the words of many politicians, a suicidal mistake. That fear is not baseless. The nature of Iran's government is a serious concern. But for many around the world, that argument starts to sound a little thin when you put it next to the sheer scale of the double standard. It begins to look less like a neutral application of rules and more like one powerful group deciding who is and who is not allowed to have power. The constant threats of military action, the crippling sanctions, the intense international pressure, all of it is happening in a world where just next door, a country sits quietly with the very weapons that Iran is being punished for even thinking about. This glaring imbalance doesn't just create political tension, it creates a psychological effect. It builds a narrative. And in that narrative, Iran, despite its own government's flaws, starts to look like something else. A symbol of defiance against a system that feels rigged. Why would anyone support a country like Iran getting the most dangerous weapon on earth? Especially when that support often comes from people who live in secular democracies or from nations that have no direct stake in the Middle East. It's a question that seems baffling if we only look at it through a security lens. But if we look at it through a human lens, a psychological one, it starts to make a strange kind of sense. This isn't about cheering for Iran's government. For many, it's about something much bigger. It's about balance. For decades, the story of the Middle East has been one of dominance by the United States and its key regional ally, Israel. Their military and political power has been unmatched. To an outside observer, particularly in the developing world, this can look like a unipolar system. One superpower and its friends setting the terms for everyone else. In this context, Iran's defiance, its refusal to bend to pressure, becomes a symbol. It's seen as a challenge to that dominance. Supporting Iran's right to a nuclear program, even if you don't want them to actually build a bomb, becomes a way of voting for a different kind of world, a multipolar world, where power is more evenly distributed, and where no single country can dictate the fate of another. It's a vote against what they see as hegemony. There's a deep cultural and historical current at play here too. The scholar Edward Said, in his groundbreaking book Orientalism, described how Western powers have historically created a narrative about the East. They constructed an image of the Orient as exotic, irrational, and threatening. This othering, as he called it, made it easier to justify controlling or intervening in these regions. Look at how Iran is often portrayed in media and political speeches. The language used is often designed to create this sense of a strange, dangerous other. It's a place of chanting crowds, fanatical leaders, and irrational ambitions. This narrative makes it easier to justify sanctions and threats of war. It frames the conflict as a simple story of good versus evil, sane versus insane. But what happens when people see through that story? What happens when they see the glaring double standard we've been talking about? The narrative starts to break down. When people see one country being praised for its secret arsenal while another is condemned for its open, inspected one, they start to question who is writing the script. They begin to suspect that the othering of Iran might be a political tool, a way to isolate a country that refuses to play by the established rules. This leads us to a fascinating quirk of the human mind, a cognitive bias identified by social psychologists like Lee Ross. It's called reactive devaluation. The idea is simple. We tend to devalue or dismiss a proposal, an idea, or even a person simply because of who it comes from. If your sworn enemy offers you a peace deal, your first instinct is to assume it's a trap. You devalue the offer because of its source. Now let's flip that logic. Reactive devaluation has a shadow self, If you deeply distrust a powerful entity, say a government or a bloc of powerful nations, and you see that entity constantly attacking a weaker one, you might start to unconsciously overvalue the position of the one being attacked. It's the psychology of the underdog. We have a natural sympathy for the little guy standing up to the bully, even if we don't know much about the little guy. So when people see the full weight of global power bearing down on Iran, while Israel is shielded, it can trigger this reaction. Their support for Iran isn't necessarily a rational calculation about its nuclear program. It's an emotional, gut-level reaction against the perceived bully. It's a way of saying, if you are trying this hard to crush them, maybe they're not the only problem here. Maybe you are. This explains why you might find a student in Brazil, a shopkeeper in Indonesia, or an activist in South Africa who feels a sense of solidarity with Iran on this one issue. They likely know very little about the technical details of the NPT or the internal politics of Tehran. They are not endorsing the Iranian government's human rights record or its regional policies. They are reacting to a picture they see clearly, a picture of an unequal fight. Their support is a protest. It's a signal of distrust in the global storytellers. It's a way of balancing the scales, not with a weapon, but with an opinion. It's a quiet, psychological resistance against a system that, to them, has lost its claim to fairness. The more one side insists Iran is the ultimate evil, the more the other side looks at the hypocrisy and thinks, the problem is bigger than just one country. The problem is the game itself. So where does this leave us? In a world of uncomfortable truths. The truth is that Israel's secret nuclear arsenal, born from a desperate need for survival, has created a fundamental imbalance in the Middle East. It created a reality where one country lives outside the rules that are strictly, and sometimes violently, enforced on its neighbors. And the truth is that Iran, run by a government that many find repressive and dangerous, has managed to position itself as a champion for the defiant. It has tapped into a deep well of global resentment against what is seen as Western hypocrisy. It's tempting to try and find the hero and the villain in the story, but perhaps there isn't one. What if there is only a broken system? A system of global governance that preaches rules for all, but in practice has rules for the weak and exceptions for the powerful. The danger of this broken system is that it breeds the very instability it claims to prevent. The policy of Amimut, Israel's strategic ambiguity, was designed to create stability through fear. And for a time, perhaps it did. But today, that same policy is used as the central justification for Iran's own nuclear defiance. The secrecy that was meant to be a shield has become a reason for others to seek a sword of their own. The support for Iran's nuclear program is one of the most misunderstood phenomena in modern politics. It is almost never about an affinity for the regime in Tehran. It is about a deep and growing distrust of the system itself. It's a symptom of a world that is losing faith in the fairness of its power structures. When the umpire is also the best player on one of the teams, the game loses its legitimacy. This is not an argument for a nuclear-armed Iran. The thought of more fingers on more nuclear triggers, especially in such a volatile region, is a terrifying one. But ignoring the reason why some people are willing to countenance that possibility is just as dangerous. Yelling louder about the dangers of Iran won't work if the people you're yelling at can see the unspoken bomb right next door. The story of Israel and Iran is a paradox. One country's quest for security became another's reason for ambition. The silence demanded of one became the outrage directed at another. The real, unspoken bomb at the heart of this conflict may not be a physical weapon. It might be the double standard itself. It's an invisible force that corrodes trust, fuels resentment, and pushes the world, slowly and quietly, toward a more dangerous future. By making the idea of a balance of terror sound like the only rational choice. And the most difficult question is not how to dismantle a weapon, but how to rebuild a system that everyone, not just a select few, can believe in.